Ever feel like someone's watching you, even when you're alone? That's what happened to Rafi. It was 3 in the morning, the kind of quiet where you can hear your own heartbeat. Suddenly, a voice, soft as a breeze, whispered his name. Rafi. Help me. ... Double quotes, his eyes snapped open. He sat bolt upright, heart thumping against his ribs like a drum. The room was pitch black, a deep, inky void, and a shiver ran down his spine, not just from the cold night air. He scanned the familiar shadows of his room, his desk, the chair with a pile of clothes, his bookshelf. Nothing. No one. He must have been dreaming. But then, a flicker of light from under his bed caught his eye. It wasn't the usual glow from his alarm clock. This was different. A soft, silvery pulse. He leaned over the edge of his mattress, squinting into the darkness. There it was. A tiny silver key, no bigger than his thumb, glowing with a faint ethereal light. It seemed to breathe, the light ebbing and flowing, calling to him. A million thoughts raced through his mind. Where did it come from? Who whispered his name? Was this some kind of prank? But his brother was fast asleep in the next room, and his parents were definitely not the pranking type. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to ignore it, to pull the covers over his head and go back to sleep. But the whisper lingered in his ears, a plea he couldn't shake. His curiosity, stronger than his fear, took over. His hands stretched out, fingers trembling slightly as they closed around the cool metal of the key. The moment his skin touched the key, the whisper came again, clearer this time, right beside his ear. Thank you. ... The door. Find the door. ... Double quotes. The glow from the key intensified, casting long, dancing shadows across his bedroom walls. It felt warm in his palm now, a comforting weight. A door. What door? He looked at his bedroom door, then his closet door. They were just ordinary doors. This couldn't be what the voice meant. He clutched the key tightly and slid off his bed, his bare feet silent on the cold wooden floor. He felt a strange pull, a gentle nudge in a direction he wouldn't normally go. It was leading him out of his room, down the quiet hallway of his house. He tiptoed past his parents' room, holding his breath, the key acting like a tiny lantern in his hand. The pull led him to the living room. It was bathed in the pale blue light of the moon, filtering through the large window. The house was still, frozen in time. The key's glow seemed to point towards the old grandfather clock that stood in the corner, a family heirloom that hadn't worked in years. Its pendulum was still, its face frozen at 6:15. As he got closer, he noticed something he had never seen before. Etched into the dark wood, almost invisible in the dim light, was a tiny keyhole right below the clock's face. It was the exact size of the silver key in his hand. His heart hammered. This was it. This had to be the door. With a shaky hand, he inserted the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. He turned it. There was a soft click. Not a sound of metal on metal, but more like a sigh. The front of the grandfather clock didn't swing open as he expected. Instead, the air in front of it began to shimmer like a heat wave on a summer day. The solid wood of the clock seemed to melt away, replaced by a swirling vortex of shimmering colors, deep blues, purples, and flecks of silver, like a galaxy being born right in his living room. It hummed with a low, magical energy. It was a doorway, a portal to somewhere else. The whisper returned, full of hope. Come, please, ... Double quotes. Rafi stared into the swirling portal, mesmerized and terrified. Where did it lead? Who was this person, or thing, that needed his help? And why him? He was just Rafi, a normal kid who liked video games and hated homework. He wasn't a hero from one of his comic books. But the voice, it sounded so lost, so desperate. He thought about the key, how it had appeared just for him. Maybe this was his story. Maybe, for once, he was the one who had to be brave. He took a deep breath, the magical air from the portal filling his lungs. It smelled of old books and fresh rain. He gave one last look at his quiet, normal house, and with the silver key still clutched in his hand, he took a step forward into the shimmering light. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of color and sound. He felt like he was flying and falling at the same time, tumbling through a tunnel of stars. It wasn't scary, just disorienting. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. His feet touched soft ground. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to a new light. He was standing in a forest, but not like any forest he'd ever seen. The trees were enormous, with silvery bark that glowed just like his key. The leaves were a deep shade of indigo, and glowing, moss-like fungi carpeted the forest floor, casting a soft, blue-green light on everything. The air was cool and sweet, filled with the sound of unseen creatures chirping and a gentle, melodic humming. It was beautiful and a little intimidating. "You came." The voice was no longer a whisper, but a clear, gentle sound. He turned and saw her. A girl, about his age, was sitting on a large, mossy rock. She had long, silver hair that seemed to capture the light of the forest, and her eyes were the color of amethysts. She was translucent, shimmering like a ghost, and he could see the glowing trees right through her. She was wearing a simple white dress, and around her neck was a silver chain, but it was empty, with a space where a pendant or a key should have been. She smiled, a sad, grateful smile. "I'm Lyra," she said, "and I'm trapped." Rafi approached her slowly. "You single quotes, the voice. I'm Rafi. Trapped. What do you mean?" Lyra gestured to the shimmering, see-through form of her body. "I am a spirit of this forest. Or I'm supposed to be. A shadow creature stole the heart of my power, a gem that hung from my necklace. Without it, I'm fading. I can't interact with my world. I can only watch it. I used the last of my energy to send my key across the veil, hoping someone kind would find it. Someone brave." She looked at Rafi, her purple eyes full of hope. "The key you hold can open the lock to its lair, but I can't touch it. Only someone from your world can. A shadow creature. A magical gem." This was way beyond anything Rafi had ever imagined. His first instinct was to say no, to find a way back home. But looking at Lyra, fading and alone, he couldn't. He had come this far. He had the key. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, his voice more confident than he felt. "I'll help you. Where do we find this shadow creature?" Lyra's ghostly face lit up. "Its lair is in the darkest part of the forest, in the hollow of the weeping willow. The creature is drawn to fear. You must be brave, Rafi. Your courage will be your shield." She pointed a shimmering finger deeper into the glowing woods. "Follow the path of the silent stones. They will lead you." Rafi looked down at the key in his hand, then back at the path Lyra had indicated. It was a journey into the unknown, filled with danger he couldn't even comprehend. But he wasn't just Rafi, the kid who was afraid of the dark, anymore. He was Rafi, the boy with the silver key, the person Lyra was counting on. He took a deep breath, the magical air steadying his nerves. "Okay," he said, turning to face the path. "I'm ready." He took his first step, the glowing moss crunching softly under his sneakers. Beginning a quest he never asked for, but one he knew he had to finish. The adventure had truly begun. Make sure you resubscribed so you don't miss what happens next on Rafi's journey. Thanks for watching. The next morning, Rafi woke up to the smell of old paper and rain. He stretched, his bones popping a little, and swung his legs over the side of the bed. The strange dreams from the night before lingered at the edges of his mind, fuzzy and indistinct, like trying to remember a half-forgotten song. All he could recall was a sense of urgency, a feeling that he was supposed to do something important. He'd found that old silver key in the attic yesterday, and it felt heavy and significant in his pocket. He pulled it out, its intricate floral design catching the morning light filtering through the dusty window. It was beautiful, but also unsettling. What did it open? He went downstairs, the old wooden floorboards groaning under his weight. He made a quick breakfast, but his mind wasn't on the toast or the coffee. It was consumed by the key. This house, his grandmother's house, was full of secrets. He'd spent every summer here as a kid, exploring its nooks and crannies, but he had a feeling he'd missed something big. After breakfast, he decided to do a more thorough search. Maybe he could find the lock that this mysterious key belonged to. He started in the living room, checking old chests and antique cabinets. Nothing. The library was next, filled with towering shelves of books that smelled of vanilla and thyme. He ran his fingers along the spines, half expecting a secret panel to spring open, just like in the movies. Again, nothing. The key remained a silent enigma in his hand. Feeling a little discouraged, he decided to just walk through the house, letting his intuition guide him. He passed the dining room, the kitchen, the small sunroom at the back. He was heading back toward the main staircase when he stopped dead in his tracks. At the far end of the long upstairs hallway, a place he'd walked past 1,000 times, there was something new. Or rather, something he'd never consciously registered before. A door. It was small, barely half the height of the other doors, and painted the same faded cream color as the walls, making it almost invisible. It had no doorknob, just a small, dark keyhole, tarnished with age. How had he never seen this before? It was as if the house itself had decided to reveal it to him only now. His heart started to beat a little faster. He walked towards it slowly, the floorboards seeming to hold their breath. He stood in front of the small door, a strange mix of fear and excitement churning in his stomach. He looked down at the silver key in his hand, then back at the lock. They looked like they were made for each other. As he stood there, hesitating, he heard it again. The whisper was faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but it was clearer than it had been in his dream. A soft, pleading voice, seemingly coming from behind the door. "Please." It sighed, the sound so full of sorrow it made his skin crawl. "Help me. I'm trapped." Rafi's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just his imagination. Someone or something was on the other side of that door. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to run, to get out of the house, to pretend he'd never found the key or the door. This was the stuff of nightmares, the beginning of a story where the main character makes a very, very bad decision. But he couldn't move. The voice, as faint as it was, held a powerful, magnetic pull. It wasn't menacing. It was desperate. He thought of his grandmother, how she used to tell him stories about the house being alive, about it having a spirit of its own. He'd always dismissed them as fairy tales. Now, he wasn't so sure. His hand was trembling as he raised the key. The metal felt cold against his skin. The whisper came again, a little stronger this time, a breath against the wood. "Please, unlock it." Rafi squeezed his eyes shut for a second, took a deep breath, and made a decision. He had to know what was behind that door. He couldn't just walk away, leaving that desperate voice trapped in the dark. He slid the silver key into the lock. It was a perfect fit, sliding in with a smooth, satisfying resistance. His heart hammered against his ribs like a drum. With a final shaky breath, he turned the key. There was a loud metallic click that echoed down the silent hallway. For a moment, nothing happened. Rafi held his breath, his eyes fixed on the door. Then, with a low groan of ancient, unoiled hinges, the small door began to swing inward, all by itself. It opened slowly, revealing not a room, but a profound and absolute darkness. A cold draft washed over him, carrying a scent he couldn't quite place, something like damp earth, forgotten memories, and a hint of wildflowers. The whisper was gone. The hallway was utterly silent again, except for the frantic thumping of his own heart. The darkness in the doorway seemed to pulse, to breathe, beckoning him forward. He was standing on the threshold of a secret that had been hidden for who knows how long. And now he had to decide whether to step through. He peered into the blackness, but it was impenetrable. It was like looking into deep space, a void that swallowed all light. He fumbled for his phone, turning on the flashlight and pointing it into the opening. The beam cut a sharp cone through the dark, but it didn't seem to illuminate anything. It was as if the darkness was so thick, so old, that it simply absorbed the light. He could see the beginning of a narrow, steep staircase leading down. The steps were made of rough, dark stone, slick with moisture. He couldn't see where they led. The air drifting up from below was cold, much colder than the rest of the house. He felt a shiver run down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. What was he doing? This was insane. He should slam the door, lock it, and throw the key into the deepest part of the ocean. But curiosity, that powerful, dangerous human trait, had him in its grip. The voice had been so real, so full of pain. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to find this, that this was his responsibility somehow. He took another step closer, leaning into the opening. He called out, his voice sounding small and weak. "Hello? Is anyone there?" Only the silence answered him. The profound, heavy silence of a place that has been closed off from the world for a very, very long time. He hesitated for what felt like an eternity, his mind racing. This could be a trap. This could be the biggest mistake of his life. But what if it wasn't? What if someone truly needed his help? He thought about the stories his grandmother used to tell, fantastical tales of hidden worlds and forgotten magic. He'd always thought they were just stories, but standing here in front of this impossible door, he started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, they were more than that. He took one last look back down the familiar hallway at the world he knew. Then he turned back to the darkness, tightened his grip on his phone, and took the first step down into the unknown. The stone was cold and slippery under his shoe. The small door swung shut behind him with a soft click, plunging him into complete and total darkness with only the small beam of his phone to light the way forward. The door groaned open, revealing not a hallway, but a small, cramped room. It was thick with the smell of dust and decaying paper. Sunlight, sliced thin by grimy window panes, illuminated dancing motes of dust. Shelves crammed with ancient leather-bound books lined the walls, their spines faded and cracked. The air was heavy, still, as if it hadn't been disturbed in a century. And there, in the far corner, huddled amongst the shadows and forgotten stories, sat a girl. She looked to be about my age, maybe a little younger. Her dress was simple, a style I'd only seen in old photographs, and it was smudged with dirt. She had her knees pulled tightly to her chest, her arms wrapped around them as if holding herself together. Her hair, long and dark, fell like a curtain over her face. When the door creaked behind me, she flinched, and slowly she lifted her head. Her eyes were huge, wide, and filled with a kind of desperate hope that sent a shiver down my spine. They were a startling shade of blue, like a winter sky, and they were fixed on me. I stood there, frozen in the doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs. The rhythmic tapping from before had stopped. Now there was only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the thumping of my pulse in my ears. I couldn't make sense of it. A hidden room, a girl locked inside. My mind raced, trying to fit the pieces together, but they were jagged and sharp, refusing to connect. This was my house. I'd lived here my whole life. I knew every nook, every cranny, every loose floorboard. Or so I thought. "Hello," I managed to choke out. My voice sounded small and foreign in the suffocating silence. The girl didn't answer right away. She just stared at me, her gaze intense, searching. It felt like she was looking right through me, into the very core of my being. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was a whisper, raspy from disuse, but clear. "You heard me," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. I took a hesitant step into the room, the floorboards groaning under my weight. "Heard you." I heard a tapping. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "The tapping was for you. You're the only one who can hear it." Her words hung in the dusty air, nonsensical yet chillingly certain. Only one who can hear it. What did that even mean? My parents, my friends, they would have heard it. A sound that loud, that persistent? It was impossible, unless it wasn't a normal sound. "I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I took another step closer. I could see the fine layer of dust on her clothes, the way her fingers were white-knuckled as she gripped her own arms. She looked terrified, but not of me, of something else. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It doesn't matter who I am," she replied, her eyes never leaving mine. "What matters is that you're here now." Her expression shifted, a flicker of urgency crossing her features. "He knows you're here. He knows you found me. He? Who's he?" My mind jumped to dark places. A kidnapper. A madman living in the walls of my own home. The thought was terrifying. I scanned the small room, but there was nowhere to hide. Just shelves, books, and the two of us. I softened my tone, trying to sound as non-threatening as possible. "Who did this to you? Who locked you in here?" The girl's gaze flickered from my face to a spot just over my shoulder, towards the wall of the hallway I'd just come from. A new wave of fear, sharp and cold, washed over her face. She didn't speak. Instead, she slowly, deliberately lifted a trembling hand and pointed. She was pointing behind me. My blood ran cold. Every horror movie trope I'd ever scoffed at screamed through my mind. "Don't turn around. Whatever you do, don't turn around." But I had to. I couldn't just stand here with this terrified girl pointing at some unseen monster standing right behind me. My muscles tensed, my neck felt stiff, as if it were made of stone. Slowly, fighting against every instinct screaming at me to run, I began to turn. I turned my head first, my eyes scanning the empty hallway. Nothing. Just the familiar wallpaper, the family photos hanging slightly askew. Relief, weak and premature, began to bubble up. Maybe she was just confused, delirious from being locked in here for so long. I turned my body fully, ready to reassure her, to tell her we were alone. And that's when I saw it. On the wall opposite the hidden door, cast in the dim light of the hallway, was my own shadow. It stretched long and distorted, a familiar silhouette I'd seen a million times. But this time, it was wrong. Horribly wrong. My body was tense, my posture rigid with fear. But my shadow was relaxed. It was leaning casually against the wall. And as I watched, frozen in pure, undiluted terror, its head tilted. And on the featureless, dark expanse of my own shadow's face, a smile began to form. It was a wide, predatory grin, a slash of deeper darkness in the gray, and it was smiling right back at me. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My breath caught in my throat, a strangled gasp that made no sound. It wasn't just a trick of the light. It wasn't my imagination. My own shadow, the constant, silent companion that had followed me my entire life, was moving independently. It was alive, and it was smiling. The girl's words echoed in my head. "He knows you're here." The shadow pushed itself off the wall, the movement fluid and unnatural. It wasn't just a flat shape anymore. It seemed to gain a horrifying three-dimensional quality, peeling away from the plaster. It took a step towards me, its form elongating, its smiling face growing wider, more menacing. It didn't make a sound, yet I could feel its presence, a palpable cold that had nothing to do with the temperature of the house. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but my body was locked in place, a statue of pure fear. My eyes darted back to the girl in the room. Her face was a mask of utter despair. "It's him," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He's the one who locked me in. He's the one who's been waiting for you. My shadow. The thing that had been with me every day, every moment. The silent observer. Was it the guardian of this prison? Was it the monster?" My mind refused to process it. I looked from the smiling, advancing darkness to the captive girl, and a horrifying realization dawned on me. The tapping wasn't a call for help, it was a lure, and I had walked right into the trap. The door to the dusty room was still open, a sliver of sanctuary. But my own shadow stood between me and it, its grin promising a darkness far deeper than any forgotten room. Thank you so much for watching. This is just the beginning of Rafi's story. If you're as hooked as I am and need to know what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We post new parts of the story regularly, and you won't want to miss a single moment. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think the shadow wants. We'll see you in the next part.